Hi again, Becky here, Lead Stewardship Officer at the Diocese of Leeds. Here again with another presentation for you, making a fundraising plan for your church. For those of you that haven't met me before, I work at the Diocese of Leeds. I'm the Lead Stewardship Officer and I come with a background in fundraising from a children's hospice as well as being a teacher in a primary school for many years. I'm also a member of the Institute of Fundraising and I have a diploma at the Institute in fundraising. So hopefully I'll be able to pass on some tips and hints for you today. Now, making a fundraising plan for your church is actually very, very similar in content to the sorts of things that I talk to people about when I go and do a financial review. So if you're intending on having a financial review with me or Janet in your church, this content is really similar, and you'll see how we analyse the data that we find in churches and how we use that in order to inform our next steps, in order to inform our fundraising plans. Hopefully you'll find it useful. It's in 3 parts. The last part is very small. It's really the evaluation part. The first part is quite meaty, and please don't feel you can miss out any of the parts. Even though the first part is sort of a mini audit and we're not actually doing any planning, it's really crucial to understand where it is we are now in order to be able to inform where we want to go in the future. So really, that is the first part of the section. Where are we now? This is looking at the data that we have at our fingertips and being able to use it to inform our next steps. So really the process of this presentation in all its parts is to look at how we would go about really making a plan for any project that we're doing, looking at where we are now, looking at data, looking at what we know about our church and where we've been, the journey that we've taken. Thinking about where we would like to be in the future. So I guess for 99% of our churches, it is really financial stability. It's being able to pay the bills. It's being able to have something in reserve for when we need it. It's having a church that's watertight and has all the facilities that we need and the rest. And the yellow part, the how will we get there, is putting together plans so that we can achieve that stability really. And then the final bit is the evaluation. That's the bit where we look back on the plans we've put in place to see whether they've worked and whether we can adjust them or tweak them to make them better next year. So the data that I'm going to talk to you about, I'll just show you where I've got it from. Now many churches already know where data comes from, and in fact they've used this parish returns website quite well, but a lot of churches don't know where the data comes from, and I'd just like to highlight the parish returns website that the Church of England provide that keeps together all the data that churches submit in terms of mission and finance as well. So it's the parishreturns.churchofengland.org, and you will need to log in. The clergy or the treasurer will have details of logging in. And you go to the button that says view your data, and that takes you to a page where you can view the historic data that you've put into the website. So when you've gone to the view your data button, it takes you to the next screen where you can find all the churches in the diocese. You can select your church, follow the arrow number 3, and click on the button that says charts and dashboards. So taken to the next screen, you want to select the finance dashboard as opposed to the statistics for mission dashboard. This is the information we're going to be using in order to inform our fundraising planning. So when you've gone to the Parish Returns website, it throws up 7 charts that show the financial situation in your church, and we're going to look at each one in turn. The charts all show different aspects of your financial accounting. So this one, number 1, is the total income and total expenditure, both restricted and unrestricted amounts combined. Your charts will look different to this. This is an anonymous church that I've just picked off Parish Returns. But basically, everybody's is the same in the sense that it tells the story of your church over the last 10 years. So this church, as you can see, has had some major expenditure in 2012, or major income in 2012 and major expenditure in 2013, suggesting a capital build, and that is exactly what happened in this church. And yours might show similar spikes depending on what you've been working on over the last 10 years, and that's fine. But what we don't want is we don't want the red line to continually exceed the purple line. We don't want expenditure to exceed income. Obviously that's not sustainable, and that's when we start running into problems, because if we're dipping into our reserves in order to maintain that, then obviously we need to do something about it, either raise income or stop spending. So this initial chart gives us a bit of an overview of where our church is at the moment. We can see on this one in 2018 expenditure did exceed income, and the church came to me with the worry that that was going to be a trend that increased because they had falling numbers of regular donors and things, and falling rental income from the church hall. So we looked at this graph as an overview, really, of where the church was to begin with. So the second graph that comes from parish returns is the giving and gift aid recovered for the last 9 or 10 years. Now, just breaking down that chart there, you can see that tax efficient planned giving is the purple part of the bar. The light purple part is all the other planned giving, so the non-taxpayers who give to the church. The orange part is the collections that are made at services, and the grey part is all other giving, so that's all other donations that's not planned and not collected at services. The yellow line, the bobble that goes along the bottom there, is gift aid recovered. Now again, yours might look quite different to mine, but I'll just tell you the points that we're looking at on this chart. We're looking first of all at the tax efficient planned giving and the other planned giving. Now I can see on this church here that tax efficient planned giving has taken quite a dip and other planned giving has risen. Now there seems to be no explanation for that, and it would seem that some promotion on the gift aid regulations amongst the congregation might be beneficial, and that could be something that you want to utilise. Talking about planned giving and talking about the gift aid tax element of it is quite useful to people because they don't always understand it, and I think in this church's case it would be really worthwhile and valuable. Now, as a consequence of the tax efficient planned giving going down in 2018, the gift aid recovered has also gone down. So there's a double whammy there, really. There's double loss of income, the gift aid and the tax efficient planned giving. Now, sometimes I look at these charts and I see that gift aid is a bit wobbly. That yellow line bobbles up and down, and it transpires that the church hasn't claimed gift aid for a couple of years, and that's something they haven't been aware of. So if your yellow line hits the bottom, it will mean that there's been no gift aid claimed in that year. So do go back. You've got 4 years to claim if there's any gift aid gaps in your line. All the other parts of the bar, like collections at services and all other giving, seems to have remained pretty constant over the last certainly 3 years in this church. But I think the main trend to bear in mind, and this is common across the church, is that all planned giving has gone down because our congregations are dwindling. So it seems that fewer people are giving more, but that reflects in the figures as less income overall anyway. So if yours shows a downward trend, then it's usual. It's not to say that it's not worrying, but it isn't uncommon. So obviously looking at this chart will give us an indication of some things we need to address going forwards. Now graph 3 shows us the planned giving and planned givers over the last 9 or 10 years in our church. And I said before that the number of planned givers typically has gone down in the church, and the weekly average gift has gone up. So fewer people are giving more, and you can see that reflected in this chart with the distance between the top of the grey bar and the purple bobble in the number of planned givers. Now, although it's a trend and we know it's happening in our churches, it's still a worrying trend, and it's something that lots of churches are trying to address. They're trying to get back to previous levels of number of planned givers. So this church in 2009 had 65 planned givers, which has dwindled off to 30. Now, we know our congregations are aging, and some might have actually died or moved away from their church. But it's not to say that this can't be addressed. And lots of churches are being really positive about it and are adopting the parish giving scheme in order to invite people who casually give to the church to become more planned givers to the church. And there's plenty of ways that the Stewardship and Income Generation team can talk to you about attracting new planned givers who aren't necessarily congregational members, but who still want to give to the church for a plethora of reasons. They like the buildings, they like coming to the groups that are on offer there, they like the community aspect of the church. So please come and speak to us if you want to get that number of planned giving numbers, the numbers of planned givers back up again. Now this slide follows on from the last one. It shows the levels of planned giving across the country, and it's quite stark that in the south of England gifts are higher on average per week, and in the north slightly lower, although Leeds sort of bucks the trend amongst the northern dioceses there. Our average planned gift in 2017 was £11.10, so we just sneaked into that little green bracket. Figures for 2018 indicate that that's gone up to £11.30. So we're on the right road. We are going up. Now, I would say when I look at this chart is what I need to do is compare this information to the information that I've picked out from the Parish Returns website that applies to my parish. So if I'm around the £11.10 mark in terms of average gift from my congregation, I am doing okay. I'm on average. If I'm below, I'm not. If I'm higher, I'm above. And also think about the indices of multiple deprivation. So it's expected, isn't it, to be slightly under if our congregation lives in a poorer area. And it's expected to be slightly over if our congregation lives in a more affluent area. Now, if that doesn't relate, then we need to think about what we're doing in terms of stewardship messaging and generosity. Are people being as generous as their wealth would suggest they can be? Are we looking at Leeds and thinking we're performing as well as the other deaneries or the other episcopal areas? It's about looking at the data and thinking, are we about right with where we are? If we are, doing well. If we're above, we're doing brilliantly. If we're below, we need to think about generosity and stewardship. Now, this slide's quite wordy, so I'll try and abbreviate it in my own words. And it follows on again from planned giving and generosity. It suggests that 10% of planned givers give a quarter of the income to the church. So of all planned giving, it's given by 24% of it, probably near a quarter of it, is given by 10% of the congregation. And further, 20% of the planned giving in a congregation typically give 44.3% of income to the church. So what it's saying is the church is quite highly subsidised by a few planned givers. Now, I don't get to see the data drill down into such detail as to who gives what and what proportion of people give the most. But you do. And ask yourself again another difficult question. Are some people in your congregation being generous to the point of subsidising the others? And that leads on to this. So following on from the last slide is this chart that just shows levels of giving to our church and levels of generosity. And it just really highlights every giver who gives to our church and tries to label them into the reasons that they give to their church. Looking at the left-hand side are those people who give when they're asked because they never know when they might need the church. Moving right through to the right-hand side, to the people who give to the church joyfully and sacrificially. And then there's any number of people in the middle who give to the church for different reasons, who feel they want to give to the church because they pay for the bits they enjoy. The people who support the church because it's important to them and they feel they want to support it. The subscribers, the people who sit in the subscription category who want to contribute their fair share of costs. And then the submission group of people who understand what it is to be a disciple of Jesus Christ and to put God first in their life. Now, when I speak to clergy, they see a majority of their congregation sitting, if not in the middle of this chart, perhaps towards the left. And they ask that difficult question of themselves, are they doing enough to encourage people to see giving to their church as a duty, something they should do to give back to Jesus and God for their goodness to us? And usually, looking at this chart brings some sobering truth. It's that we're not talking about the church and generosity enough. So do have a look at this and question whether you are able to move your givers across to the right. And even, is there anybody in the community that you could bring on into the survival piece, the survival part of this chart? People who give to the church because they're asked and they might need the church for some reason. So graph number 4, it shows the income breakdown for the church. And looking at the bars, you can see the purple part of the bar is total giving. That makes up the biggest proportion of the income for this church. Yours might look slightly different, but total giving here has gone down in real terms, and we've already seen that the number of planned givers is dwindling. The second part of the bar, the white stripe, is the fundraising. So the amount of fundraising that you've been able to do through events or bake sales, things like that. Trading is the next part of the bar, and here it's a very small, tiny piece of the 2018 income figures. It was a bit better during the early years of the 2010s, but it seems to have tailed off now. And then people often ask, what is trading? And it depends on how the treasurer accounts for it really in the books, because trading and fundraising can be interpreted in different ways. Fundraising is mainly income raised through events. Trading is mainly income that's raised through hire of services, hire of facilities, or sale of goods. So if you've got a church hall that you hire, or the church itself, that comes under trading. I'd be asking this church, what has happened in the last 3 years for your trading income to have declined? And if it turns out that trading income used to be good because we had a group that used to use the church hall regularly or hire the meeting room regularly, then I'd be thinking, well, is there any way we can reinvigorate that? We can bring that back to life. Can we advertise it again and try and get more groups in to use the facilities that we've got here in the church? The yellow piece is the gift aid recovered from all donations, and it's tailed off here because obviously tax efficient planned giving was looking like it had dwindled a bit in this church. The turquoise stripe is the PCC fee, so that's income received from weddings and funerals. And the final stripe is other income, so other donations that have come into the church that don't fit into any of the other categories. So you'll be looking at this chart now and looking at where you can bring more income in, particularly if there's been some major changes over the last 10 years, it's worth asking yourself, can we go back to the good old days when we were getting that income for that reason? So it's a useful graph because it forces you to look back and think, what was it we were doing then that we're not doing now? And how can we make an opportunity there? How can we make the best of an opportunity there? Now, PCC fees falling off. Some churches say are generally falling off. Some churches say, oh, they've had more weddings than they've had in previous years. But as a general rule of thumb, people are choosing weddings that are outside the church. So wedding income has fallen. Funeral income has maybe increased or stayed the same. But PCC fees are a bit of a falling income line for the whole diocese and for all the dioceses as a whole, because churches seem to play a less active part in these major life events. So that would sort of indicate that we need to take action elsewhere, because there's not a lot we can do really about PCC fees unless society decides that we all want to get married in church again. But you know, it just gives us the thought or the idea that if PCC's fees are falling, what is it we can do to mitigate that? Where else can we make income? So graph 5 shows the expenditure. It shows where the money is going that we're bringing in. Now, typically in these graphs, we see parish share making up probably a third of each bar. So that's the red part in each bar. It should be making up approximately a third. Now, this church has struggled to pay parish share over the last few years. And when we look at where other expenditure has gone, you can see that mission giving and donations has roughly stayed the same. And the pale line, the pale green line, is the salaries and expenses. Now that has increased over the last few years. You can see in 2015, not a great deal was spent on salaries and expenses. So you might be wanting to look at that and where you are paying people that you don't need to pay, and if there's a volunteer that could do the job and save a bit of income. Now, sometimes when I go to churches, I hear stories of cleaners that have been employed or parish administrators, and these might be really needed. But actually, when the PCC has analysed whether they are really needed, looking at the chunk that expenses and salaries takes out of their income, they've been able to do a workaround. So they've been able to get a volunteer committee together to do cleaning, or they've been able to share the task of the parish administrator in order to be able to reduce their hours. So the outlay has been less for those sorts of jobs. So it's a question that you need to ask yourself. If salaries and expenses are looking particularly high, is there any saving we can make there? The other part of the chart that looks pretty high, and it is again on all churches, are the church running expenses and utilities. So the heating, the lighting, the insurance. We know that churches try their best to minimise the way they use the heating, so it's not on for no reason, and lights go on and off when they should. And we know that churches are often hugely energy inefficient buildings. So if there's anything we can do to help you here, such as look at an energy survey, or to try and find you a grant for more efficient lighting or even heating, then please do come to us, because we might be able to find some money that can help you reduce these costs. Now, often people say, well, we'd love to be able to put a new efficient boiler in, or some proper lighting that doesn't burn energy like it's going out of fashion. And these things aren't cheap. And churches are often only able to apply for these things if they have a certain amount of reserves anyway. So even grants are not a magic bullet. If we can get some free grants for you to help you pay for the things that are going to help you save energy, you still need to have match funding in place to be able to support it a little bit yourself. So it's a bigger picture than just finding a grant to reduce those costs. Also, don't forget to use parish buying to help you reduce costs when you're buying anything. Now, parish buying, for those of you that don't know, is the National Church of England's sort of shopping supermarket where you can buy things related to your church, like energy, insurances, even things like photocopying paper, and you buy them at a reduced cost because the church have negotiated special prices with dealers and suppliers. So go to the parish buying website if you're buying anything that you think is quite expensive to see if you can undercut the price you're paying. So graph 6, it shows the legacies, the grants and the capital expenditure for the last 10 years. Grants in this particular instance have gone up quite well, and as capital expenditure, and we already saw in the previous few graphs that this church had a particularly big spend following a period of income and generation. Now, I often say when we're looking at this graph is if you've not had any grants for anything that you've been buying lately, why not? Have you been paying for things from your reserves that we could find free money for? Again, as I said previously, grants don't always cover 100% of the cost of any work that you need to do, but they cover a fair proportion. And it does break my heart when I see churches who are struggling to pay for something that I know they could find a grant for. So please come and watch my grant presentation on the DLP, or come and ask me for the grant booklet so we can find a supporter that could help you subsidise some of your projects. The other part of this chart, which has been lumped along with grants and capital expenditure, are the legacies. It's a common picture to see the legacies, the green line, sort of bump along the bottom. No legacies received for years and years and years. And in fact, this church did have a legacy of just over, what was it? Of exactly £10,000 in 2017. So it's not been there's not been no legacies received. The thing is, with the Church of England and legacies, we tend not to do very well. Now, typically in the whole charity sector, legacies account for 14%, an average of 14% of a charity's income. Now, in the Church of England, legacies account for 7% of the total income, which would seem to be a real disconnect, because actually the church is best placed to receive legacies, wouldn't you think? And so where is it we're going wrong? And actually in Leeds, when we think about what the legacy income for Leeds is, it's even less than the national picture of 7%. The income from legacies for the Diocese of Leeds is 5.5%. So compare that to the 14% that secular charities receive in legacy income. And we're not doing too well. Now, my argument is we don't promote it very well, and we don't talk about legacies. We don't give people the option to leave a gift in their will to the church. We don't give them the idea that they can leave a gift in their will to the church. So at the bottom of this presentation, I've included a download to my legacy promotion pack, which will help churches to think about the ways they can promote legacies to their congregations and just talk about them generally so that they're not a frightening thing. And it gives people the idea that when they're making the will, along with choosing all the other charities that they can leave their bequests to, they can also choose their church. So please do have a look at the legacy pack that will be available at the end of this presentation, probably in April, and see whether you can implement some of those ideas to talk about legacies to your church, because we need more legacy income. It could be transformational to the work of your church, and certainly transformational to the work of the church as a whole. So this is the final graph from parish returns. The final graph's telling us where are we now, and this shows the restricted an unrestricted reserves picture of your church. Now, unrestricted reserves here are quite small in this church, and it might be the similar picture in your church, and you will have a reserves policy in the PCC that says how much you're allowed to keep in reserves. Normally 3 to 6 months of operating costs is quite usual. But the restricted reserves here are quite high. Now, I don't know what the restrictions are on that money. But if you do have high levels of restricted reserves, it might be that you need to take a look at that, especially if you're finding it hard to pay parish share or you're finding it hard to pay the bills in general, because some restricted reserves can be creatively used. If they're, for example, ring-fenced for buildings, there is a way that you can use that income or that pot of money to pay for repairs, obviously, but also to pay for ongoing costs to the buildings. So perhaps for heating for buildings or for insurance for buildings, and just have a look at the wording of the restrictions on there and see whether they are prescriptive or whether you could use them creatively to pay for things that your unrestricted income is struggling to pay for right now. So that brings us to the end of looking at all those charts, doing our little mini audit, thinking about where we are now in our church. Now, at the end of the presentation, I've put a prompt sheet that asks you to look at each of your graphs in turn and to pick out those trends and those opportunities that you think you could use to develop in the next section of this presentation. So do download the prompt sheet, print it off, and make some notes by comparing your charts to the things I've talked about and things that you've observed. And hopefully by the time you finished your prompt sheet, some ideas will be beginning to emerge about actions you need to take to reverse some declines or to bring in some income by making the most of new opportunities. Thank you. So we've done the mini audit. This is part 2 of the Making a Fundraising Plan presentation. This is looking at where we would like to be, how we want to move forwards, and we know that what the situation is in our church, and to some extent how we want to move forwards will be dictated to us from where we already are. So we will have seen the gaps in those graphs and the improvements that we can make that will guide us into the decision making for this part of the process. So here's an idea of the kinds of things that we need to pay for. Some will have higher priority than others, and that's a good thing. The ones at the top of the list are the things that will focus our fundraising efforts going forwards. Decide what it is here that are needs and decide what it is here that are wants, so that you can build these into the objectives in the next part of the session. So we've decided what we'd like to pay for. So how are we going to do it? This is the SMART target part of the exercise, where we think about specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-scaled objectives that we're going to use to raise the money. So I've just thought of a few SMART targets here that are based on what we found out at the beginning of this session when we looked at the graphs and the charts. We noticed that planned givers had gone down and we wanted to reverse that trend. So here's a SMART target that might fit. Increase the number of planned givers from 35 to 55 by June 2020 using the parish giving scheme, the new planned giving scheme that hopefully will encourage people to give to their church regularly and in a tax efficient way and in a inflation proofed way as well. Moving envelope givers to standing order givers, the obvious benefits there are by giving by standing order, which is regular and reliable. It reduces the administration, it reduces the amount of cash going around the church. Increasing gift aid, if gift aid looked like it wasn't being optimised, particularly if there were more people giving in church who were not taxpayers, is there a case for highlighting and promoting the benefits of tax efficient giving to the church? Some people aren't aware of it, and unless they're aware of it, they're not going to give you gifts in a tax efficient way. Maybe you looked at the planned giving figures for the Diocese of Leeds and you thought to yourself, your parish could do better. So maybe you want to increase the average weekly planned gift. Here's a few more. Perhaps you saw that church running expenses were too high and you wanted to reduce those. Maybe you know you've got facilities that are being underutilized at the moment and you can identify groups of people that would potentially hire it from you. Or maybe you want to run an event like a wedding package so that you could increase the use of the facilities that you have. Maybe you want to obtain some grant funding for some planned building improvements. So don't struggle to pay for these sorts of things yourself. There is some free money out there that will help you. So thinking about SMART targets, yours may or may not match the ones that I've just shown you previously. What targets can you use to drive the fundraising effort that you're going to do going forwards? Don't forget to relate them back to the information that you found out in the audit, the information you identified from those charts that you know needs addressing. Thank you. So we've done the mini audit, we've looked at those charts and graphs, we've also made 3 very smart objectives. So we've got a bit of a clue about, well, where it is we're heading. Now, here's the good fundraising bit. This is the bit where we start to put the ducks in a row, to coin a phrase. This is the bit where we put all the fundraising plans that we've got in our heads to make those objectives work. So we've got to write down some plans about how we're going to get there. Now, here's a selection of ideas of things that you could use to try and raise income in your church. Now, this list is not exhaustive by any stretch of the imagination. These are just ideas of things that people in our churches are doing right now in order to raise income. The main one, if I'm completely honest, at this present moment is the planned giving and the parish giving scheme. People are really working hard to increase the number of planned givers and to secondly increase the size of the gift that they're getting from each planned giver. That said, there's also a lot of work going on with legacies as well, because we know how transformational legacies can be to our church. So plenty of things are going on in the stewardship office to promote legacies. So please do get in touch with us. We do have lots of information to share with you. Legacies aren't a quick win. There's never any quick money that comes in from doing legacy promotion. But that said, when legacies do come in, they do make a big difference. So gifts to churches that have come from legacies have enabled planned building works to get on, to enable mission to grow. It's been wonderful to see. So any of these, please get in touch with us. We can supply further information to help you on your way there. And you will have your own ideas too, and get together with other people in your deanery to see what it is they're doing that's bringing the income in. So who is it that does what? This is a very small part of my presentation, and it really just highlights the fact that it isn't one person who does everything. And in this brilliant cartoon church cartoon here from Dave Walker, it's normally the vicar that does everything. Well, sometimes in the finance world, it's usually the treasurer that does everything. And the fact is, it shouldn't just be one person that does everything. It's a team effort, and actually team efforts get best results. So by working in a team, we can identify somebody who wants to lead a project to raise income, somebody who might be able to do it, but they're not entirely sure and they might want a bit of extra training, particularly people who want to apply for grants but aren't sure how to do that. Also bringing brand new people in who might want to have a go at something. So not necessarily somebody who wants to get roped in and fears that they're going to be asked to do more and more and more, or fears that they're going to be asked to do something that is too onerous. But just a little part of a fundraising plan could be allocated to 1 or 2 people, and you might find that actually they relish the fact that big responsibility isn't on their shoulders. Also, great fundraising teams keep regular meetings, so everybody knows what everyone else is doing. And also, but don't be afraid to take chances and try something new. So just because you've always done a tea party in July, it doesn't mean you always have to do a tea party in July, especially if the income isn't there. If it takes a lot of planning and preparation, best to put planning and preparation into something that's going to give you a high return. Okay, so don't be afraid to switch things up and give people reasons why you're switching things up. Now here's a slide that I produced about persuading people to be generous to their church. Now, three very different donors here, all Christian donors, all wanting to do their bit and to do their bit for the church, but each have their own reasons for wanting to do their bits. And equally, I would also say, each have different views about the amount they give to the church. So the chap on the left, he's heard communication that the church takes a lot of money to keep running. The heating takes a lot to pay for. The roof is falling in. So they give a little bit to the church because they need the church to be there. But this donor also gives quite a sizable donation to another charity, and that's all well and good, and I wouldn't discourage any of that. And the same with this lady here. She knows that the vicar's very important to her, and she might have some understanding about how the share system works to pay for clergy stipends, and some theology behind her gift. She knows God loves a cheerful giver, so she gives a bigger donation to the local hospice because they helped her dad. So a very crucial reason why she gives to charity. Both people, both the chap on the left and the lady on the right, have heard communications from other charities about why they should have their money. Now, the chap in the middle, I would argue, has been extraordinarily well communicated to by his church. He knows that the money that he gives to his church helps to pay for his beautiful church building. It might be a tatty church building, but to him it's beautiful, and maybe that's been communicated to him as well. He knows the work that his vicar's been doing all week. He's been kept informed with the mission work and the ministry work that goes on behind the scenes. And he also knows that as a part of the church, they help to feed people who are in need in the cafe. And the parish share system, the fact that it actually goes to support the poorer parts of the diocese who can't afford a vicar, who can't afford the mission and ministry to go on in their church, but actually he knows that Christianity, worship, is not just for the rich. So I would argue that the chap in the middle has been exceptionally well communicated to by his church. So what I'm saying is think about how you communicate your messages to your congregation. Do you show them the vision that you have for your church and the mission and the ministry that goes on? Do you talk to them about the costs that the church the church has to keep open? Now, if all of this is a little bit of an enigma for you, helpfully at the bottom of this presentation, I've produced a download that is a very simple trifold leaflet that you can adapt for your church that gives exactly the sorts of messages that the chap in the middle has been hearing. So it's a really good communication tool to talk to your congregation about the needs of your church and why that you need generous giving to support your work. So please do download the trifold leaflet. You can fully edit it, put all the information in that is pertinent to your church. It's really useful. If you don't take anything else from this presentation, please use the communication leaflet. You will also have other ways of talking to your audience as well. Now, you may have some or all of these communication tools. They're just suggestions. If you don't have a website but you're thinking of one, I would say definitely go for it. It's a great way to shout out about the great things that you're doing. People often have leaflets and posters, although that's moving more online now as we get more environmentally friendly. Social media is a big tool in the church at the moment. Do get in touch with the digital team if you're struggling with any aspect of social media. Use the church calendar, put adverts out, put notices in shop windows and things, talking about your church to people and talking about the events that you may be putting on or the planned giving scheme that you're launching. Anything from that slide that you saw previously with that tree and all those coloured circles around it, whatever you're doing from there, these are the ways to communicate to people about them. And you want to try and do them all. You want to market yourselves like a real charity. Other ideas that you can use to get your messages out, all the resources that you may need to help you, we've got somewhere on our website, or the stewardship team can forward them to you as email. Different ways that you can collect money, just giving, contactless card readers, direct debit, standing orders, text giving, any of these things that are going to help you achieve your target, please put them in place. And don't be afraid. The support is there to help you put them in place. People have had massive success with contactless giving and digital giving, even when they thought they wouldn't. Same with the parish giving scheme. It's been phenomenal. The take up for it from the Diocese of Leeds has taken us all by surprise. We've been really pleased. So even if you think that some of these are not for you, make an informed decision and try and decide whether actually they're worth a go. Nobody will penalise you for if they don't work, but at least you've tried them. So who's going to do all this? Who's going to lead, preach and pray? So I said before, it's not just the vicar's job. There's lots and lots and lots of people who can help you deliver a Christian stewardship message, and best you get as many people involved as you can for the best results. So why not think about the Archdeacon? Why not think about the congregation leading worship from time to time? Bring all of these people in to talk about generosity, bring all of these people in to lead events. So going slightly back to those 3 objectives that we've talked about when we were looking at the SMART objectives. On this slide, you can see I've put those in the second column on this chart. So this is really a planning grid showing all the information from the previous 5 slides. So what we've decided to do, this church have decided to look at planned giving. That's item number 1. They decided to look at wedding packages because they knew there was a target market that they could tap into, and they had a church hall that was being underutilised. And they decided to think about legacies as well, how they could promote legacies to their congregations. So the SMART targets go next to those themes, if you like. So we want to increase the number of planned givers, we want to hold 2 wedding packages, and we want to increase the number and size of legacy gifts. So all the actions are the ways that we're going to do that. They're all the things we're going to do in order to make those objectives happen. So you could have several actions. I've just put 4 on this page here, but the page is as long as it needs to be, really, in order for those objectives to work. You can identify people who need to be involved in column 4, and a target completion date in column number 5. So 3 very clear objectives broken down into pieces, really. It makes it more manageable, and it gives people specified jobs to be getting on with as well. And moving on from that, the chart can be further broken down into a Gantt chart. So you don't have to do this, but I often find it helps to plan the fundraising year, so you're not actually asking people for money constantly, which is the worry that I hear from fundraising teams and treasurers across the diocese. We're always asking for money. Well, actually, if you plan it so the year is broken down into a series of stewardship events, into events where people who are using the church but not necessarily parts of your congregation are having an event like a wedding package. And maybe if you've got legacies in there, you're just promoting legacies, but you're not necessarily asking people from money from their purses right there and then. So you can spread your activities out over the year. So you're not always asking people for money, but also you're not overstretching your human resources. So your fundraising team, your vicar, your treasurer aren't being overworked at any given point of the year. And you can also allocate budgets as well to your efforts, so you know how much it's going to cost to drive these fundraising plans forwards. Hooray, we've made it to part 4, the final part of this presentation, the evaluation part. It's the evaluation part which people see as the least valuable part, and I would see as probably the most important part, because this is the part where you decide that what you've done has been a success or not, and the piece where you can make all the necessary thank yous and you can build on this bit so that you know you can make progress the next time you make another plan. And making a plan is a process that is continual. So even after this process, you'll be planning for next year's fundraising activities. And it's a great idea to do them in yearly pieces, because that way you're keeping a real tabs on the finances and you're spotting opportunities and money that's hemorrhaging before they become a problem. So take this part seriously. We're nearly at the end. Let's have a look. So crucially, at the end of any fundraising activity, whether it be at the end of the year or whether it be at the end of an event, it's crucial to say thank you. And that's not just to everybody who has given you their planned gift. It could be to the church scout or to the scout group who have hired the church hall and provided £500 of income for your church that you wouldn't have ordinarily have had. So think widely about all the people that have supported your business and make it your business to say thank you, because that is the way that you will continue to get their business. Don't forget this part, it's really crucial. Also, announce overall results to everybody. Don't forget to say this is what we raised when we've been doing our brand new event. The wedding packages that we've run this year have brought in an extra £2,500 that we wouldn't have ordinarily have had. Celebrate that success. People who have given their free time in order to make this happen like to see their success celebrated, and people who have donated like to see where the end result is as well. Don't forget even to draw to make a connection between the income that's been raised and the money and where it's been spent. So if you have managed to raise £500 from the Scout group because they've hired your hall, tell them that it's enabled you to provide lunches for the lunch group for 6 months. Tell people where their money has been spent or what it has enabled you to do that you wouldn't have ordinarily been able to do. People love to see the impact of their donations. And also, of course, finally, give thanks to God for his goodness and give thanks to God for his generosity, enabling us to be as generous as we can be. You'll also want to look back at those plans that you wrote, those SMART objectives, and those charts that you wrote where you broke down the objectives into actions. What went well and can be reused? So if your legacy campaigning went particularly well, can you reuse it in 2 years' time, or does it need to be tweaked? If you had a wedding event, maybe it didn't fly as well as you expected. What was it that you could change to make improvements there? Can you use the plans that you made for that year moving forwards? Can you build on them and improve them? Is there something that you would like to add into the mix that you haven't had a chance to do this year, but you know you could try next year? You won't want to keep the fundraising the same every year, but you will learn and you will grow and you'll progress. So that each year you'll start to hone those skills and you'll eventually become pros.